Notes of Thought in Heren Literature. Second year classics, Harvard University. Okay, hi everyone. We're still not allowed to meet in person until these protests die down, or I don't know, until our freedom of speech is oppressed enough. I don't know if you saw this on the Harbridge website, but we're not allowed to meet in groups of 9 or more people. Interesting that they chose the number 9. Anyway, it's mayhem out there, but we're going to continue. Our work is never done. And I think, as you saw from the previous posts, the epic saga, The Binder of Sorrows, is just fascinating, and I can't get enough of it. So we're on to column 2 now, which is known as the House of Failing Remedies. This is inscribed in the second column on the inner sanctum wall, Reed Coast Temple, which is site A3. And this translation and some of the notations are via our friends at the University of Beijing, Department of Antiquities, although I haven't been in touch with anybody since the internet went out over there. So they added a summary at the top of this, which is interesting. It's very quick. It just says, Ra Ciala's system of healing begins to break under the famine. Remedies that once worked now stall, reverse, or fail entirely. The shift from physical illness to something more structural, more Antaran, begins. That's an interesting breakdown of this, and I don't know who wrote that, but curious. Okay, I'm just going to continue with the reading and pop in with the notes as we go. Part 1 of column 2 is the unblessed vessel. They say that in the second week of the black season, when the stars no longer mirrored the tides, when even the old tide poles leaned the wrong direction, Mem Tahara finished the shaping of her vessel. It was not blessed. It was not named. No priest marked its bow with oil. No singer walked its length with smoke. No child was lifted to touch its hull for luck. I think, this is a side note, I think that the reason that none of the normal rituals were performed on Mem Tahara's vessel here is because of the state of the famine. Society was breaking down. That's what I'm taking from this. I don't think it's because Tahara had done anything wrong or she was building this vessel for this voyage without the blessings of her people. I think there just wasn't a working normal civil structure around her at the time. Continuing. It was cut from a fallen breadfruit tree, not chosen, but found already broken, split by no storm any man remembered. Some said the tree had fallen inward, its roots lifting before its crown bent. Others said it had been standing at dusk and laying dead by dawn. Tahara did not ask which was true. She stripped it with her own hands, pulling bark in long wet curls until her fingers bled. She hollowed it with flint and patient fire. burning, scraping, burning again, until the inside smelled not of fruit, but of old smoke and opened flesh. She smeared its ribs with sap and ash, ash not from hearth fire, but from the famine pyres, where bodies had burned too quickly and not at all. So we're learning that normally they would use ash from the hearth fires to harden the walls of the vessels, but because of the famine, Tahara is using the ash from the funeral pyres. That's pretty grim. Continuing, she spoke no words while working, but those who passed said she listened, not to wind, not to sea, but to the wood itself, as if it might remember what shape it had once held. Part 2. The names cut into the hull. Each mark on the hull corresponded to a name, not carved with a blade, but scratched with a fingernail, pressed slowly until the skin tore and the line filled red before it dried. Ra Isun, Mem Sialu, Ra Karata, Mem Orene, Ra Velkor, Mem Ta'iran, Ra Named, Mem Lora I, Ra Etek. 9 names, etched by nail, not tool, though 3 are now worn smooth, their grooves swallowed by salt and time. Each name placed not in a line but scattered, 1 near the prow, 2 beneath where the knees would rest, 1 where the hull curved inward as though making room for another body. When asked why, Tahara is said to have answered, because they are scattered seeds. Over the rudder she carved, not for glory, not for gain, for rain alone. And beneath it, barely visible, cut shallow and later deepened by another hand, let what follows follow me. So again, we're seeing signs of the famine. These names are carved into the hull. I'm assuming these are names of the dead, of those who have been taken by this famine. That's how desperate the situation is. Also, this let what follows follow me. It's a very curious translation because the words here, let what follows, that means let what comes next. Let what is going to happen in the future happen to me. But when we translate it to English, let what follows follow me, it also means let what happens in the future be the result of my actions. So it takes on a certain kind of bravado or arrogance, I think, in English that I don't believe is there when you read it in the original Terran. There's an annotation here, annotation 2D from Beijing. The secondary inscription beneath the bow line appears to have been added post-construction. Dr. argues that the phrasing suggests not invocation but acceptance of consequence. If authentic, this may represent one of the earliest known articulations of voluntary burden assumption in Terran text. Okay, that's a very interesting way of reading it. I didn't look at it that way. And I've read this before. I don't know why this is getting by me. What Dr. is saying is let what follows follow me refers to this Terran idea that a burden does not necessarily stay where it was originated. Therefore, let what burdens all of us in the future burden me, meaning Memtahara, as she begins this voyage. So she's taking burden upon herself. Okay, this is a fun part. Part 3, gathering the crew. What good voyage doesn't have the gathering of the crew? She spoke to no gods, but to those who had already been answered. She found Kalo of the broken net, who had once pulled his son's body from a storm drain. The child's fingers still tangled in weeds, as though he had tried to braid the sea into something kinder. This line gets me every time. So Kalo, his child was weak from the famine and had died in a storm drain. In the city, there's evidence of a huge network of drainage aquifers, and the child's fingers were still tangled in weeds, as though he had tried to braid the sea into something kinder, because the sea had killed him, right? Okay, continuing. Kalo no longer fished. He wore the ruined net around his wrist like a binding. Its knots tightened where memory slipped. Tahara found Heren, whose wife had returned from the water without her mouth, not torn, not eaten, but absent, as if speech itself had abandoned her. Heren spoke rarely, and when she did, she covered her lips. Tahara found 3 others, sailors of the city docks, men whose hands knew distance better than sleep. One had buried 2 daughters. One had forgotten whether he had children at all. One no longer entered shallow water, claiming something beneath it recognized him. Their names are worn smooth now. Only fragments remain in the stone. But their feet survive, cut at the base of a column. 5 pairs, facing outward, not toward shore, not toward sea, outward, as if already leaving. This again is fascinating too, because it's kind of meta. It is very Heren. They are carving the story into the wall, right, in the temple wall. And alongside the carving, there is a bas-relief sculpture of the 5. And this story is now referencing the carving of the sculpture that is right next to the story where it is carved. So what we're seeing in that is an entire a system in effect. I guess at this point, this is now a story being told from long ago, and a civilization that is once again thriving. It's post-famine, and they're capable of building buildings, continuing their carving tradition, and we're seeing in the story references to the carving. It's a very Heren kind of circle of reality where there's a constant present at the moment of the writing, and then there's the present of the story as well. Going on here, before boarding, they stood in a ring around the vessel, facing away from one another, each toward a different dark. And they swore no oath of victory, no oath of return, no oath before gods. Instead, they said, if one is taken, we speak their name. If one is held, we do not cut the cord. If one forgets, the others remember. If one hungers, we divide the hunger. If one is answered, we do not turn away. Then Ra Kalo spoke, and if grief chooses one among us, let it not eat alone. No one answered, but each touched the boat once, as if agreement might pass through wood. They brought no weapons, only a bowl of bitter herbs, dried to dust, a bundle of long bones, cleaned and tied with gut, a mask painted with the blood of drowned birds, its beak split down the middle. They made no chant, they burned no incense, but each opened their hand and let blood fall into the sea before stepping aboard. Not cast wide, but poured slowly, as one empties a vessel meant to be filled again. Tahara entered last. She did not cut her hand. Instead, she pressed both palms against the side of the boat and held them there until ash hidden in the grain marked her skin. There's two notes here. Annotation 2A. The practice of bloodletting into the sea may relate to the pre-Matoka ritual known as sinking grief, where grief was transferred from flesh to salt water as a way to anchor memory outside the body. This would mark an early fusion of empathy rites with seafaring customs. That's interesting. I've not heard of sinking grief. Why is Beijing holding out on me? What the fuck? The practice of bloodletting into the sea may relate to the pre-Matoka ritual known as sinking grief, where grief was transferred from flesh to salt water as a way to anchor memory outside the body. We have to assume this is metaphorical, and for a seafaring culture, the idea that you're surrounded by something as endless as the ocean must have felt to them. The idea of letting grief go into the ocean seems very natural psychological conclusion to draw, but it's really interesting. Annotation 2B, the painted bird mask appears again in murals found in Prime B, the second sort of location that we found that is northeast of Dark City. Professor suggests these masks were used not for disguise, but for carving presence, a ritual declaration to the divine that the wearer exists and cannot be unmade. I need to get more information on that, the idea of carving presence, but it is absolutely known and kind of assumed from sculpture around all of the ancient civilizations that an effort at immortality through the creation of objects is a way of fighting death, right? And having life have meaning. So, makes sense. Part 4, the Forbidden Current. This is interesting because as a seafaring culture, there's an incredible amount of accumulated cultural knowledge around how the sea moves and works, and I don't like boats. I never go in boats, so I don't know much about it. But it's deeply interwoven in Heren culture, knowledge of the tides and currents. Okay, part 4, the forbidden current. The reefs of the reed coast are jagged like the ribs of sleeping giants. To pass beyond them, when the stars answered water, was the work of sailors. To pass during flood season was ordinary. To pass in fish months was common. To pass beneath red moons required blessing. But to pass beyond them, when sky and tide no longer agreed, this belonged to no chart. For the reed coast sailors did not navigate only distance, they traveled permission. They followed remembered winds. The sea held roots the way bodies hold scars. The tide answered stars. The stars answered season. And season answered memory. Now the chain had broken. The stars no longer mirrored the tides. The channels wandered. The water forgot itself. The council forbade it. They came to the shore in number, elders with salt-stiff hair, shore walkers bearing poles carved with tide marks, priests with bracelets hidden beneath cloth, old navigators whose eyes watered constantly from too much horizon. They offered water, they offered songs, they offered silence. One elder said, "The sea is sick." Another said, "No current returns the same twice." A navigator whispered, "The ninth wind has turned inward." None dared touch her. A mother cried out, "My son is already dead. You are a fool to feed another god." A priest shouted, "There are currents even Vokara fears." Tahara did not answer. She drove the oar into the black current. The water did not resist. That was the first sign. The second, the wind died, as though holding breath. Part 5, the unmarked night. On the first night, they did not sail, they drifted. Kalo sang softly to the net on his wrist, each knot a name he would not speak aloud. Heren wept for 3 hours and would not say why. One of the unnamed sailors laughed once, sharp, misplaced, then bit his tongue until blood filled his mouth, and did not laugh again. The others slept. Tahara did not. The stars spun without pattern, not scattered, but arranged wrong. The moon shifted its face 4 times before morning returned, as though searching for the correct witness. The sea beneath them refused reflection. When Tahara leaned over the side to see herself, she saw instead the inside of a throat. Something moved there. Not a tongue, not teeth. Something waiting. Far beneath the hull, the water clicked softly, as though stones were learning speech. No one dreamed cleanly. Kalo woke twice with seawater in his mouth. Heren woke once speaking to someone already dead. Before dawn, one of the unnamed sailors asked quietly, "Are we still moving?" No one answered. The horizon had gone missing. God, that's a powerful first night on the sea. And this terrifying image of Tahara leaning over the side of the boat and thinking that she's going to see her reflection in the water, and instead sees a throat. And then inside the throat, there's no tongue or teeth, but something else that's moving. It's horrifying. Annotation 2C. The anomalous description of the stars, including the quadruple shift of the moon, lends credence to the theory that this part of the sea was either, 1, a region of active astral distortion, or 2, governed by an anti-chronological force, possibly divine. The absence of reflection in the water has been tentatively linked to later inscriptions describing identity refusal zones. That's 2 notes, both of which seem extremely far-fetched. I think Beijing has drunk the Kool-Aid a little bit here. What are you talking about? There's no astral distortion or anti-chronological force that is divine. I don't know what they're talking about. Metaphorically, I can see what's going on. They're setting out on a voyage, desperate, absolutely forced into action by this famine to save their people. They have no idea what they're going to do or how they're going to solve this problem. And the first night of taking this step, they feel as though the stars have been rearranged and they're losing their own identity by moving away from their homeland, everything they know. The idea that any of that is literal is kind of crazy pants. So I don't know what they're thinking. There's one last phrase that ends this column. And so began the voyage, not counted in days, but counted in dreams lost, names thinned, offerings devoured before they were given. And so began the voyage, not counted in days, but in dreams lost, names thinned, offerings devoured before they were given. And that's the end of column 2. Interesting again, because the idea that this is the launching into action of our hero and her team, and yet it's just filled with sadness. It's very emotional to me, and it's such a gift to feel some sort of kinship with people going through a hard and desperate time where society was falling apart around them, and they felt the need to take action. And I think with everything that's going on for us, I think we can probably say we feel the same. Okay, well, we'll be back next week with column 3, the first rising of Okara. And it just gets stranger from here, and also equally enjoyable. So email me your questions, and I'll continue reading this next week. All right, thanks. Modes of Thought in Heren Literature. This podcast is made possible by Harvard University, a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Peeler Prize in Archaeological Literature, and the Harpage Family Trust, with an in-kind donation and production assistance from Wolf of the Door Studios. For more information and a reading list, please visit modesofthoughtpodcast.com.